Being. The self is just being. It is not being this or that. It is just being. Self-realization is just being. It is not being this or that. It is just being. Being knows no alternative. The self is just being. Being never changes its nature. That which truly is never ceases to be. That which ceases never actually is. That which truly exists never changes. That which changes never truly exists. That which is changeless is without destruction. The indestructible is only. That which is without creation. The unborn is the undying. The unchanging is alone being. Being never changes its nature. The self ever is, just as it is. There is no time when being is altered. There is no time when you are not the self. Primordial being eternally is what you are even now. Immutable being is peace itself. For there is no time when being is altered. Just as it is, the self ever is. Being alone knows itself. The eyeless I realized as I, forever undefined, the only existence, the only knowledge, the only knower, absolute reality, always present, unmarred perfection, the unformed void, attributeless being, ever itself just as it is, the only identity, the only reality. Being alone knows itself. Without any other is absolute being, formless and non-dual, the only existence. Two that are formless cannot be, undivided, homogeneous, alone is being. Nothing outside it and no outside. Nothing within it, alone is being. Nothing comes before eternal being. Nothing comes after eternal being. Without any other is absolute being. The truth of being is solely reality, not from illusory things, falsely experienced. Does the sense of reality in every experience derive, but only from the self, the only source, the real? Real being depends not on anything else to be. Uncaused itself, the absolute self, does not cause anything else. Infinite there is, nothing beyond it produced by it. Mistake not perception or conception for existence itself. Reality is solely the truth of being. The uncreated alone is all, the all transcendent is the all pervasive. Neither dualism nor a concept of unity is the non-dual truth. Non-objective being is not a multiplicity, nor is it one in many, nor is it many in one. Attributeless indivisibility it is. The uncreated alone is all. Be as you are. Realization is just being. Final meditation upon the truth consists of being it, for which there is no alternative. Being is neither a state nor an attainment. Being is neither a thing nor an activity. Being is and alone is. Be as you are. The self alone exists eternally, solitary and indivisible. The self is being consciousness bliss, without beginning and without end. The self alone exists. The self alone is real. Nothing exists but the self. The self alone exists eternally. Oneself is. Never is there a multiplicity of selves. One infinite, indivisible, undifferentiated self forever is. Like space, it is endless, formless. Like space, it is everywhere, pervading all. Like space, it is colorless, immeasurable, ungraspable, having neither within nor without, oneself is. Non-dual is realization of the nature of the invariable self. The self is never impure. So, self-realization is not of the nature of purification. The self is never born. So, self-realization is not of the nature of production. The self is never other than its own nature. So, self-realization is not the nature of transformation. The self is never absent. So, self-realization is not the nature of acquisition. Of the nature of the invariable self, non-dual is realization. Abide free of imagination. The self, your real identity, is the absolute and ever free. Do not imagine otherwise. There is no distance between yourself and the self. Abide free of imagination. Know the self as it is. The self is not matter, thought, or entity. The self is never modified, has no conditions, never becomes. Beyond matter, no birth and no death. Beyond thought, non-objective and inconceivable. Beyond ego, no individuality and no separation. Never having entered the body, the self does not exit it. The bodiless is birthless, locationless, and deathless. It does not come, is not contained, and does not go. The self is known by the wise to be bodiless. Never having entered the mind, the self is not bound by it. The mind, free, is unconceived and unperturbed. It does not think or cease to think. It knows no state, no mode, and no thought. The self is known by the wise to be of no mind. Never having become individualized, the self is innately egoless. The egoless is boundless, attributeless, illusionless. It does not become bound and does not become liberated. The self is known by the wise to be egoless. Know the self as it is. Only the self ever is. Nothing is experienced continuously except the self. The continuous alone is real. The discontinuous never really is. It comes from nowhere, and it goes nowhere. It has no birth, and it has no death. It shines in its own light, self-existent. Only the self ever is. How to compare the incomparable? Vast like space, unmoving like the mountain, self-luminous like the sun, with no shape like water, burning all the straws of ignorance like fire, tranquil like the moon's light, deep like the ocean. How to compare the incomparable? The self is, in all beings, their very being. In all selves, the true identity. In all minds, consciousness. In all things, the unseen existence. In all joys, bliss. In all places, space. In all time, endlessness. In every heart, the love, the self is.